Welcome to Cheating Story. Please like this video and subscribe to Cheating Story. There's a fine line between love and hate, and many of us walk that line every day with friends, family, and coworkers. I still can't believe I once liked that guy. I mean, what a jerk. And my personal favorite. I really hate that girl. Then there are people who always tell you not to be so hateful and that you need to show more humanity. But as for me, I focus on my well-being and the well-being of my family. It's great to have friends, but realistically, you can only trust them up to a point. From my own experience, not all family members or friends were there for me when I needed them. It was a tough lesson, but the upside is that I found out who my real family and friends are. My name is Pace Jensen. I'm 29 years old, a former soccer player, and I love running. I'm married to Amy, who's a wonderful wife and mom, always with the right attitude. But the best part of my life is being a father to 3 little boys. At the time of our collapse, Amy and I had been married for around 7 years. The reason we had children so quickly was simple: I couldn't get enough of my wife. I lived and breathed Amy. And that's where my downfall began. I think we got married the day after graduating from college. We both went to UMass. Amy majored in secondary education, and I majored in management information systems. She got a job at a prestigious private school in Dallas, while I worked at Empire Funding. We had a great start to life together. Like any couple, we had our ups and downs, but nothing major. Our first argument, it happened when I wanted to buy a 1968 Shelby Cobra GT 500. It was a 2-door fastback with a 302 cubic inch, 4.9 L V8 engine, GT 350. And the cherry on top, it was candy apple red with 2 white stripes down the middle. Unlike some people, I could afford a $100,000 car. Classic cars are my passion. Anyway, as I said, Amy and I had a great life. We lived near my family, and I thought that was a good thing. My parents were in their 50s, and I had a younger brother named Rob, who was 17 at the time. He attended the same high school where Amy taught, and she even had him in one of her classes. Rob was 12 years younger than me, but we were still very close. No matter what happened, I was always expected to make sacrifices for him. That's just how our family worked. The motto was, "Be brave, son. Give it to your little brother, and you'll be a better person in the long run." My dad said it so often that I eventually just tuned it out. One of the few good things in my life was my best friend, Jeffrey Parks. He was the brother I wished I had. We had been best friends since 3rd grade, and Jeff, being a lawyer, always had my back when it came to legal matters. Fast forward to last Monday. When I got home, Amy told me she had taken the boys to her sister's house, just a few houses away. I thought, great, we'll have some time alone. But then she said she had something to tell me. I didn't think life could get any better, but then she dropped the news: she was pregnant. I was ecstatic, thinking about when we could start preparing for the baby, hoping it would be a girl so I could spoil her. But Amy seemed distant, almost detached. I asked her what was wrong, and she said quietly, "Pace, it's not your baby." At first, I couldn't hear her clearly, but then she repeated herself. "It's not your baby." I was confused. Amy always said she wanted a big family, so why the sudden change? Then she started hesitating, like whatever she was about to say would change everything. I reassured her, telling her I loved her no matter what, and urged her to tell me. She paused for a moment, then pulled out her phone and hit speed dial. "Can you come over, please?" she asked. Whoever was on the other end of the line sounded like they knew more about this situation than I did. "Amy, who was that? What's going on?" I asked, completely lost. She replied, "Just keep calm, Pace. I need help getting my words right. I don't want to mess up what I need to say." I was confused, asking her who was coming and why she couldn't tell me whatever it was on her own. After all, if you can't tell your husband something, who can you tell? All sorts of troubling thoughts ran through my head. But what happened next completely shocked me. 2 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Amy answered the door, and when she came back, my mom, dad, and 17-year-old brother Rob were with her. I was beyond confused. "Okay, Amy, what the hell is going on?" I asked. Before Amy could say anything, Rob stepped in and dropped the bombshell. "Look, Pace, Amy is in love with me. That's what she wants to say. Mom and Dad are here to support us," Rob said, as if this were something casual. "We didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. The baby she's carrying is mine, and we need you to accept that. Amy and I are going to be a family, whether you like it or not. At first, I thought it was some sick joke. I laughed, waiting for them to tell me this was all a prank. But no one was laughing. I looked back at Amy, who was staring at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Amy, please look at me and tell me this isn't true. Tell me you're not being this stupid, I pleaded. My father then stepped in. Son, I know this is hard, but what's done is done. Rob is your brother, and we have to deal with this as a family. I know it's a tough situation, but sacrifices have to be made. I asked my mom if she was involved in this, and she said, I love both my boys. I don't want this to tear our family apart. You need to find it in your heart to forgive and do the right thing. I couldn't believe what they were asking me to do, to sacrifice my life for a selfish, immature little brother, just because I was older. It was at that exact moment that I started to hate them all, truly, deeply hate them. That fine line between love and hate had been crossed. At that moment, I couldn't take it anymore. The overwhelming betrayal, the absurdity of the situation, it all became too much. I turned and stormed out of the house, leaving Amy, my parents, and Rob standing there. I needed space, time to process everything, but I couldn't think straight. I headed over to my sister-in-law's house to pick up my kids. When I arrived, there was a sheriff's deputy waiting outside. For a brief moment, I wondered if Amy's sister, Rachel, was involved in all of this, but she looked just as shocked as I was. The deputy informed me that I wasn't allowed to see my children until a custody decision was made by the court. As those words sunk in, my anger boiled over. My entire world was crumbling around me, my wife, my family, and now even my children were being taken away from me. I clenched my fists, trying to control the rising tide of fury inside me. I asked the deputy if I could return to my own home. He asked whose name was on the mortgage, and I told him it was mine. Since there was no legal order preventing me from going back, I decided to leave and head home. As I walked past my father, he grabbed my arm. Son, please don't do something you'll regret later. We need to sit down and talk about this like adults, he said, trying to sound reasonable. I stared at him, seething with anger. Never call me son again, I hissed. Get your hand off me, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life. With that, I yanked my arm free from his grip and walked away. As I reached the door, I looked back at Amy. If I were you, I'd hire a good lawyer. Trust me, you're going to need one, I said coldly. Enjoy the kids while you can because this is far from over. Before I could leave, Rob suddenly lunged at me, striking me across the face. Shocked, I stumbled back, but before I could react, my father grabbed me, allowing Rob to take another swing. Fortunately, Rob hit like a weakling, or I would have been hurt. The sheriff, seeing the commotion, rushed over and tackled Rob to the ground. I managed to break free from my father's hold and, without thinking, I punched him square in the mouth. The look of complete shock on his face was something I would never forget. He never imagined that I, the sensible kid, could get so angry. When the dust settled, both Rob and my father were arrested for assault. I thought this was the worst of it, but little did I know, the nightmare was just beginning. A couple of days later, I received a call from the assistant district attorney asking if I would testify in court. During the conversation, I casually mentioned that my 29-year-old wife was pregnant by my 17-year-old brother, who happened to be a senior at the school where she taught. This piqued the prosecutor's interest. I could tell things were about to escalate, but at that moment, I had no idea just how far this would go. 2 days later, I went to meet with the only person I thought I could still rely on, my best friend and attorney, Jeffrey Parks. I walked into his office, feeling a mixture of hope and desperation. But when I saw him, my world came crashing down yet again. There, standing beside Jeff, was Amy, smirking at me with a look of triumph on her face. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jeff, what the hell is going on? I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. I'm representing Amy now, Pace. I'm sorry, but this is how it has to be. I couldn't comprehend it. My best friend, someone I had trusted for decades, was siding with the woman who had destroyed my life. You've got to be kidding me, I said, my voice full of rage. You're going to defend her after everything she's done. But Jeff simply turned and walked away. In that moment, I realized that everything I thought I knew about loyalty, trust, and friendship had been a lie. Jeff was dead to me now, just like the rest of them. As I left the office, I couldn't help but laugh, though it wasn't a laugh of humor. It was the kind of laugh that comes when the weight of everything is so unbearable that you don't know how else to react. I had become someone different, and I knew it. Hate does that to you. It changes you in ways you can't imagine. Determined to fight back, I sought out a different kind of lawyer, someone who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. That's when I found Stevie Crust, a lawyer with a reputation for being ruthless. Stevie was known for his motto, "If you've got the money, go for it." I tracked him down just as he was about to close his office for the day. When I told him I had a case that would soon be national news, I saw the dollar signs in his eyes. I wrote him a check for $110,000 right on the spot, knowing I'd need every bit of legal firepower he could offer. "Sooner or later, you're going to have to bail me out of something," I said, half joking but fully serious. Stevie laughed so hard he nearly choked, but I didn't care. I had a plan, and nothing was going to stop me. When I returned home, there was a sheriff's deputy sitting in my driveway. He approached me, asked for my ID, and handed me an envelope. "You've been served," he said. I barely glanced at the papers before tossing them into the trash. I didn't care what they said. All I knew was that tomorrow would be a new day, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I woke up feeling a little more in control, but the anger still simmered under the surface. I knew today was going to be tough, but I was ready for it. After getting ready, I brushed my teeth, rinsed my mouth, and combed my hair. I wanted to look sharp, composed, like someone who was in control of his life, even though everything around me was crumbling. As I stepped outside to grab the newspaper, everything changed in an instant. Out of nowhere, reporters swarmed me. "Mr. Jensen, is it true that your wife is a teacher and pregnant by your underage brother?" One shouted. Another asked, "What school does she teach at? Why hasn't she been arrested?" Their voices blurred together, bombarding me with questions I wasn't prepared to answer. I was stunned. The news had spread like wildfire, and now it was out in the open for the world to see. I mumbled something about how the authorities should be handling it and pushed past the reporters, barely able to process what was happening. But I knew, deep down, that life was about to become even more chaotic for everyone involved. From that moment on, life turned into a public spectacle. The media camped outside my house, outside my parents' home, and even outside Jeffrey's law office. Jeff, usually someone who thrived on attention, wasn't prepared for this kind of negative publicity. He was being hounded for representing Amy in such a high-profile scandal. People who once respected him now viewed him as someone willing to defend the indefensible. Protesters showed up outside his office, and one day, a group of family rights activists even threw cow urine at him. The situation became even more surreal when I was invited to appear on the Nancy Grace show. For those of you who have seen Nancy Grace, you know she doesn't hold back. The moment the story reached her, she grabbed onto it like a dog with a bone. Her reporting became laser-focused on Amy and her merry band of misfits. "Hi everyone," Nancy opened her show. "We have a child molester walking free on our streets, pregnant with the child of an impressionable young man. Where is the justice?" she exclaimed. I watched the show, slightly in awe of how intense she could be, even though I was in the middle of this nightmare myself. Despite everything, I had to admit, I looked pretty good on camera. Though, the camera does add 10 pounds, as they say. 2 days later, things finally escalated when Amy was arrested. The charges were severe: sex with a minor, breach of public trust, and statutory rape. Rob, meanwhile, was removed from my parents' custody and sent to juvenile detention, where he'd have to stay until he turned 18. The entire situation had spiraled out of control, but in a way, I was relieved. Amy was no longer walking free, and the legal system was finally taking action. A month later, I found myself sitting in a courtroom, directly across from Amy and my former family. She was represented by someone who had once been a friend of mine, a lawyer who used to sit at the same table as me, sharing jokes and memories. Now, he was on the other side, defending the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The only person I truly felt sorry for was my mom. She sat there, looking sad, broken by what had happened to her family. It was heartbreaking to see, but at the same time, I couldn't forget that she had stood by Rob and Amy through all of this. She, too, had betrayed me. Amy and my former family had called me countless times over the past month, begging for a sit-down conversation to talk things through before it went too far. But I only had one question for Amy. Did you talk to me before you slept with my brother? When she didn't answer, I ended the conversation. There was no point in continuing after that. After Amy's arrest, my kids were finally returned to me in a custody hearing. The judge granted me full custody, child support, and the house, which, fortunately, was already in my name. It was a small victory in the midst of this ongoing disaster, but I was grateful to have my children back with me. As the criminal trial loomed closer, I prepared myself to testify. I wanted to make sure Amy spent a long time in jail for what she had done. But, to my disappointment, she took a plea deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. During her sentencing, she stood before the court and apologized to me. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Her life was ruined, her teaching career was over, and she would have to register as a sex offender for the rest of her life. It was a punishment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough for what she had done. 4 years have passed since that dark time in my life. I took my kids and moved 2,000 miles away. Our family now consists of 7 people, my 3 sons, and Amy's 2 little daughters from her previous marriage. In a strange way, we're a smaller version of the Brady Bunch. I know what people will think. They'll say I'm weak for moving on, for building a new life after everything that happened. But those people would be dead wrong. Do you think I'd stay with someone who slept with my little brother? Hell no. My wife now is named Amy, spelled differently from my ex. We met 4 months after I moved. She's a motorcycle cop, and the day she gave me a speeding ticket was the day my life changed. As she rode away on her bike, I knew she would be my next wife. I had to work hard to win her over, but once we got together, it was the best day of my life. Did I mention she has her own handcuffs? I love her deeply, but it took a while to regain my trust in people after everything that happened. We're both a little scarred by our pasts, and trust doesn't come easy to either of us. We test each other sometimes, but it works for us. And to be honest, I wouldn't have it any other way.